Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Timeless. So this episode was kind of our first episode without Wyatt, because obviously what went down last episode, obviously he's in big trouble for it. I actually got it spoiled for me that they were going to get a new guy on the team. It's Dave. Well, he goes by Dave, but David. Sadly, he was not part of the team very long. Did not see that coming out. I was like, oh, maybe he's going to be around a couple episodes. Obviously, he's like a temporary solution, temporary fill-in until we get Wyatt back. But it's like, nope, halfway through the episode, he's dead. I was like, wait, what? I thought he got shot. I was like, okay, he's a little injured. And it went over to, because the moment he didn't respond quickly after that little shootout in the alleyway or whatever, I was like, okay, he got hit, didn't he? Rufus went over, checked him, he's dead. Did not see that coming. It's like, okay, I know you want to get him out the way so you can make room for Wyatt and everything, but come on, did you have to really kill him off? Especially because him and Wyatt are such, like, they're friends, so that just makes it even more messed up in a way too. I mean, granted, we don't know this for sure, but it could have been the fact is that, like, hey, maybe he was secretly working with Rittenhouse, because we still haven't really gone back to the whole recording situation. I remember that's what was kind of forced on Rufus. Well, then I forgot. Rufus turned that down. He was like, he's not going to do that anymore. So, subsequently, nothing's really come up since then. But who's to say, maybe this new guy, Dave, was actually put on the team specifically. Obviously, because he's well-trained and everything, but what if he's actually part of Rittenhouse, and he was supposed to be the new recorder, essentially, rather than having Rufus record, which obviously he wouldn't anymore. Maybe he was supposed to be there to kind of gather information. Because in this episode, basically, Christopher got pushed out because basically a new NSA guy played by Jim Beaver, aka Bobby from Supernatural. I thought that was good. A moment I saw this, Bobby's in this. I just get excited every time I see him now. Like anytime I don't even really refer to him as by name. It's like, Bobby's in this. That's so cool. Nevertheless, apparently he's kind of taken over things. And Agent Christopher's kind of pulled back from the scenes, but she starts talking to Wyatt, and Wyatt's like, okay, this is a little suspicious. Like, all of a sudden, not only just one new guy shows up, but a full team of them, like over a dozen dudes just randomly show up. It's like, there's no way they could all get this amount of clearance. Because, with such a sensitive subject, it's only a few people should know about it. So, yeah, they might eventually get a full team in there, but it's like everyone's got to be, broken down to see, like, check who they are to make sure that, to vet them is kind of what I'm meant to say. They're vetting them to make sure they're right, that they can keep the damn secret about the whole time travel thing. It's like, all of a sudden, in like a week or so, there's already been a whole bunch of people hired on. It's like, there's something a little fishy going on. And he starts thinking like, oh, it's secretly a coup. To me, my brain automatically went there. Was like, he's sitting there talking to Mason. It's like, granted, it could be a situation where it's like, okay, he's just there. Obviously, he talked to Mason because Mason's the one behind everything. This is Mason's company and everything. So obviously, you want to talk to him first because he's the one that kind of gives you the lowdown and everything. But at the same time, it's kind of like, why wouldn't you talk to Agent Christopher first? I don't know. It looks suspicious to me. Granted, they don't really think it looks suspicious or anything because they were just talking out in the open. I don't know, that just, like I said, it can just, I guess because I automatically assumed they were bad guys, so I guess that's why it just looks suspicious to me, because it could have just been like a casual conversation. Like I said, like, he is the main dude behind it, so obviously the NSA dude would want to come to him first, so. And then you had the whole situation where, like, and the fact is, Benjamin, because I'm actually going to be calling him by his name now, or just on occasion I'll probably just refer to him as Ben, but Ben, and Rittenhouse guy just kind of casually shows up there, and even Mason's like, okay, this is actually weird. Like, you hear in the person is kind of weird. It's like, yeah, anytime we talk anything, it's usually like, not actually hearing this whole circumstances that you helped build, essentially. And then he finally gets the answer he's wanting. So why are you so obsessed with Lucy? He's like, yeah, she's my daughter. And it kind of see a look on Mason's face like, oh, okay. Because that was a conversation, obviously, that's where the episode picked up at, where last week's episode left off with them talking and everything. His dad's talking about, Benjamin's like, the fact is, this is a blood thing, that basically Lucy can try and run from it, but eventually she'll kind of get dragged back into it. Because he tried to run from it, his dad, her grandfather tried to run from it, but they just always managed to come back. Because it's like, essentially he's saying like, the very, very archaic, because remember, she met the original guy who basically was the founder of Rittenhouse, and she was like, how can you work for a guy that has such barbaric thoughts and tactics of wanting how, his thought on how things should be and everything. And he's like, the fact is we've left those thoughts behind. We've changed. Rittenhouse isn't that same place anymore. It's like, let's not forget the fact is that, she didn't bring it up. It's like, let's not forget that you threatened Rufus and his family and that harm would come their way if you didn't go. But in a situation like that, you can obviously see them justifying it, being like, oh yeah, well, you have to break a few omelets. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. That if you hurt a couple people's feelings by threatening them and whatnot, who hasn't, to get people motivated, who hasn't threatened someone every once in a while? It's like, oh, it's all for the greater good. Because like we know what their plan is to go back in time and change everything, but it's like we don't really 100% know exactly. Like, you have an idea, like I said, this whole utopian type of idea, but like I said, it feels like a situation where it's like a utopia of like, oh, you step out of line, you're gone. There was a thing that kind of popped in my head real quickly. Like, if you've ever seen the show Charmed, there was kind of a part in the show where utopia kind of came up, but the moment someone steps out on line, they're like deleted from the world type of situation. Like, I'm, just kind of throwing that out there. If you don't get the comparison, if you don't get the reference, then it's fine. You don't have to. But the point is that I'm sure, like, if anyone steps out of line in this world of creating, they'll just kill them. It's kind of what they're doing now. They're cutting people down to pave the way for the world that they're trying to create. And Lucy obviously doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But her dad's like, eventually you'll come to my side. Which, to me, I automatically think, like, she will, but that's only to get an inside person, because they don't actually have an inside person in Rittenhouse. Her being with Rittenhouse could actually be a good thing. It could be their way of kind of getting insider information. But maybe maybe, obviously, it's going to be something that will be coming up soon enough. Because the season is coming closer to an end. Like, I don't know what episode this is, but I think this season's only like 16 episodes, I think. I remember reading a little while back. So it's winding down. But basically they went to Paris. I forgot what specific time period, but they ended up meeting like a pretty famous singer named Josephine. They ended up meeting Ernest Hemingway. But a lot of things to go down. Like, first they were tracking down some dude named, I think it's Charlie Littenberg. Essentially, I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly what his whole importance was, but essentially it kind of seems like he had a bright future ahead of him and everything, and then later on life takes a hard turn for him where it's like, oh yeah, he works, apparently, like, he starts spewing very Nazi related speech, and he even gets a medal from Adolf Hitler himself or something like that. And even Rufus is like, man, that's a hard turn. I wasn't expecting his life to go that direction. And it turns out there's a reason for that, because apparently he's like Lucy. He's actually I was literally about to say alumni Rittenhouse, but he's I don't know what the proper word would be to describe it. He's part of the Rittenhouse family, essentially, because he's a bloodline Rittenhouse. We also ended up finding out that Lucy's family are actually pretty prominent in the Rittenhouse. Apparently, purebloods to be exact. So I can only assume Lucy's family made it with someone else in the family, and their bloodlines created Lucy's family's current bloodline. Because they're considered pureblood, so they're kind of like the most respected. I'm not saying they are. Probably one of the, if not they're probably one of the main families amongst the Rittenhouse or whatever. So, that's the only way I can see that. It has to be like a situation where like both her ancestors like diverged, came from originally two separate bloodlines that came together and forged the current bloodline. Only way I can assume that. Only thing I can do. So basically, the whole situation with him getting like saying the things he does and kind of being awarded by a medal by Adolf, that's all because that's something his father wants him to do. He's like, this is what you have to do. Apparently, it's kind of a thing that's like, oh, get people look over this way while other stuff is happening behind the background. It's like, oh, people are so focused on this and what someone is saying and doing that they're not focused on what someone else is saying and doing over here. So that's kind of what his part to play in it. Because Lucy wants to try and talk to him, that she basically wants to try and, more so than anything, like, if she can change his life, she can change her own life. Because the way her dad was talking, it was almost like becoming part of Rittenhouse is inevitable. And she's thinking, like, in her mind, she's like, if she can talk him out of being this way, then maybe she can change her own fate. Also, it's also to save his life because, Flynn is giving her this opportunity, but if he doesn't get his way, Flynn's going to kill him. which was originally a conversation between, kind of trailing back a little bit, was the interesting conversation between her and Rufus. Because Rufus, finding out about her dad and everything, it's like, okay, the guy that's been threatening me this entire time is Lucy's dad. Like, he was freaked out at first, but he was like, it must be hard on you finding out everything, too. But then on top of that, it's like, Lucy's like, why don't we just let Flynn do what he needs to do? It's like, we know what he's up against now. It's like, let him do it, because we know Rittenhouse are bad people, so let's just do it. But Rufus is like, yeah, I get it. I hate Rittenhouse. I hate him with a passion because they threaten my family and everything. But that doesn't mean we should let Flynn do what he's doing. Because, Flynn's means isn't the right means to solving this situation. Because him doing the way he's doing means killing and hurting a lot of people. Because for Flynn, he doesn't care about how bad the ramifications will be for him changing the future, because the world, everything was set in stone. Like, even though some of these people ended up, like, you take Henry Ford, for example. Yes, he was part of Rittenhouse and everything, but he had a big influence on, automobiles and stuff. And, like, the world of automobiles would not be the same without him. So it's a situation where it's like, yeah, there are situations where people of the past have done some bad stuff, but their stuff will go for benefit people in the future. It's one of those situations where it's like, because Flynn's motivated by revenge. Like, everyone gets it. Like I said, even you take everyone in this circumstance, they realize Rittenhouse is bad people, but it doesn't mean it's right to hurt other people. Let's go back to the founder example, how Flynn wanted to kill a kid. Once again, coming down to that situation, what he basically would give birth to, like later on, what Rittenhouse would do. That basically is because of Rittenhouse that this whole circumstance has happened, that Lucy even lost her sister. Amy no longer exists and everything. So for Rufus, he's not doing things the right way. So we have to go there and because if we don't do anything, we just stay on the sidelines, let him handle it, all the bad stuff he does, that's on us because we weren't there to stop him. The real sad thing is when it's all said and done, Lucy ends up going back, in the present day, she ended up finding out that he still went down with it too. And she even has a conversation with her mom, like, why did he do it, And her mom's kind of throws out the theory, like, well, maybe it's because his dad was a congressman and that basically he liked the attention. Like, eventually, the spot, like, either his family was able to track him down anyway, even though he tried to go on a run and leave his life behind. But either that, or it's kind of a situation where, like, he did just be like, no, what? No, I'm going to do what's right, because there was kind of an interesting thing, too, when Lucy kind of brought up her own past, that basically she wanted to go to a different school and everything, but her mom was like, no, you got to teach here, follow my footsteps, essentially, because she knew she would disappoint her mom, but her sister Amy was there to be like, no, you go do your thing, don't worry about mom. But she kind of chickened out. She kind of caved in and was like, no, I can't leave mom behind and everything. And Amy was kind of disappointed in everything. I don't think that was necessarily because her mom was sick at the time. It was most likely just because it was like, it's a situation where she didn't want to disappoint her mom, but in turn, she ended up disappointing her sister. Because her sister was like, yo, like, you can't let mom kind of boss you around and dictate your entire life. You kind of have to stand up and be your own person, essentially. And to her, the most heartbreaking thing was, like, disappointing her little sister, the person that looks up to her, so. But even with that, Charlie, whichever, Lindenberg still went down. It was like he disappeared for a couple weeks, but then popped back up, like, later on, just like, oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, it's kind of a shame. Like I said, because for Lucy, she had put her hope in him, hoping that if he could change, she could change as well. I did love everything that came up in this episode, that Rufus kept being, like, the whole Josephine situation. He was just like, oh, man, like, the fact is I used to listen to her records and stuff when I was kind of feeling down and everything. And then basically, Dave was kind of calling it, like, antique porn or something like that. And Rufus was like, I'd rather use the word vintage. And basically he's talking to Josephine and everything, and it's just kind of like a little flirty and everything. He turns to Lucy's like, yeah, could you not tell Gia about, any of this? And she's like, uh-huh. And then there was a conversation he had with Hemingway later on, and he was like, you know what you have to do? He's like, yes, I know. I have to fight, drink, and screw for everyone that, for everyone that's not there. And then Lucy overhears and he's like, so can we not tell Gia about this whole thing? She says again, uh-huh. Like, which I love that. But that was a cool thing too between Ernest Hemingway and Rufus, because at the entire episode it's like, oh, Hemingway's just a drunk. But then it's like you get to learn a little bit more about why he's that way. He's that way because he lost a lot of people. He's seen a lot of people die. He even uses examples like there's a lot of dead people in the catacombs. The fact of the matter is I could crawl into a corner and die, or I can essentially, I'm paraphrasing here, nut up, drink, and stand on my own 2 feet and keep fighting, and screw for everyone else that can't, essentially, yes, it's hard. Like, he drinks as a means of coping, but at the same time, it's also because it's like he has to live up his life, not only for himself, but for every other comrade that's ever fallen, for every other person that can't live their life to the fullest. He has to live his just that much more for their sake. So, and I feel like that's something that obviously, Rufus needed here more so than anything. I mean, after recently losing Anthony under those circumstances, which he had an interesting conversation with Emma. He was like, so yeah, you be careful if I'm around Flynn. He doesn't always treat his pilots well. Which is like, the sad thing is she obviously was okay with it because she hasn't brought that up. So she obviously was there and she was okay with it. I guess at the end of the day, it's like, well, this is all for the purpose of stopping Rittenhouse, and it's like sacrifices have to be made. So it's hard. I can only assume her mentality is the same way, because I thought she'd be a little sad or devastated. It's like, no. But I think it did put a certain perspective in her mind to be like, I have to be careful, because it's like, Flynn is in a situation of getting results. And it's like, if I don't play my part and he finds someone better than me at this, then I'm out of the picture. So, because even she agreed with the whole Anthony situation, but I guess, I don't know. I'm just curious what changed her mind, because she agreed with Anthony that like, oh, we need to get rid of the lifeboat and the mothership, but apparently not. She's still working with it. And then there was the side of the story that dealt with Wyatt. Because Wyatt almost had given up. Basically, he's like, I don't need a lawyer or anything. Just leave me here to rot. This is what I deserve for doing what I did. I did a bad thing. I betrayed everyone by doing, because I was being selfish, essentially. Which is like, dude, anyone can understand why you were being selfish under your circumstances. But Christopher talks to him. It's like, yo, we can get you help, help me with this whole circumstance. But Wyatt's like, because to him, he's like, maybe at the end of the day, fate or God or whatever the case may be wants Jessica dead. But then Christopher's like, no, maybe it's because you're supposed to do something more. She kind of motivates him, being like, the fact is that maybe the thing you're meant to do is to help Rufus and Lucy, because without you, they're going to be in deep trouble. Like, you're going to basically leave them to handle this whole situation by themselves. That's a lot to, leave on your friend's shoulders without you control. Like, obviously, read between the lines on certain things. I'm probably adding a lot more context there that's actually not supposed to be the case. But I read it as kind of like, your friends are there. Like, you want to help them out and everything, to be there, to help shoulder this burden, to help them with this fight. Because, more so than anything, there's no guarantee they'll come out of it. Granted, Lucy will, because, she's connected in all this. But that's still a future you don't want Lucy to kind of have to deal with. And speaking of future, her mom ended up giving her the journal that she eventually writes that Flynn has. And now it's just like, it said, like, everything is slowly but surely getting set in stone and everything. And it's just kind of like, she has to deal with the journal now, the whole fact about her family and everything. It's a lot to take in. But Wyatt's back now, and he's like, you know what we're going to do is, I need you guys to go to work like there's nothing going on. Have Gia there, but it's like, whoa, we can't be putting Gia into danger and everything, but it's like they have no choice, because it's like, as long as everything stays status quo, like don't raise any flags, there shouldn't be any problems. He's like, basically they're going to continue this fight. They don't know how, but he's being a little more optimistic, and it's like, yo, I'm going to stand here with you guys. What I'm meant to do is stand here and fight with you guys. So I'm surprised Lucy didn't ask him about it. I felt like that would have been a perfect time to ask, but maybe that's something she'll ask in the future. It's like, what's this whole thing about Wyatt's wife, Jessica? Why didn't you? There's one side of my brain that's like, well, there could be, because obviously there's something between her and Wyatt. And it also seems like in her journal, she kind of references it. The fact is that Wyatt won't give up on his wife type of thing. So that's, it's hard to say whether that Lucy was talking from, like, the fact is that she has feelings for Wyatt, but she feels like Wyatt's too focused on trying to save his wife rather than moving on to be there with her. Like, it's like, oh, I'm right here in front of you, but you won't see me because all you can see is Jessica. So, which is understandable and everything, but you get what I mean. So, overall, very good episode. Some nice developments. It's going to be interesting seeing how everything works going forward. It's like, now they're basically under a microscope. The enemy is literally inside their home base and everything, and they've got to pretend like everything's fine. Wyatt obviously can't get directly involved, but the fact is he's missing and everything. He broke out. So Rittenhouse has probably had their eyes on making sure where he is, but it's now him and Agent Christopher going to have to work together to make sure everything's okay. I mean, especially because Agent Christopher's on the outs too, so they're going to be probably working together present day, probably maybe working with Gia. I don't know if they're going to 100% inform her on everything, because if they inform her on everything, then that means she's going to have to be like, oh, put on an A game of lying, and that's a lot to ask for someone who's not well trained in lying and stuff like that in the art of deceit. So they're probably not going to tell her anything. They just go like, oh yeah, she'll just be, without realizing it, she'll be their inside person. That's kind of how I'm feeling like that's go. But it's going to be very interesting to see how this goes forward, especially because I got a tiny peek and I saw that they do have another person with them. Hopefully this person doesn't end up dead like halfway through the episode too, because that would just suck. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.